14 teams from throughout New Zealand are here in the Wairarapa to contest the 5 stages, nearly 500 kilometres of the 2022 edition of the Trust House New Zealand Cycle Classic. Included in the teams this year is the former winner in 2011 and Tour de France rider George Bennett. He's also joined by World Tour rider Shane Archibald and the likes of Junior World representatives, Olympians and Commonwealth Game champions, all here to win the coveted yellow jersey. Yesterday's 127 kilometres from Masterton to the wine district of Martinborough was always going to be a day for the sprinters to flex their muscle. But someone forgot to tell the likes of former New Zealand Ironman Mike Phillips and the evergreen Paul Odlin as they made various breaks on the 9 laps around Martinborough in a hope of holding off the peloton. But in the end, it was Kilo Kurgi Nick Kyrgyzou who had punched the air in delight to take his first ever UCI victory, and with it the Wiz Wireless Sprint Ace lead. So we're joined here by Josh Burnett, riding for the Mitre Q New Zealand Cycling Project team. Well, Josh, the team have had some pretty good results so far.
Yeah, we had George and Case up in that first move, and they got a lot of points both in the sprint jersey and the KOM. So pretty successful tour for us so far, and hopefully add a bit to that today.
Yeah, I was going to say today would suit the likes of yourself. A lot of uphill, a lot of undulations, and of course a change to the stage finish this year.
Yeah, I think on paper today does suit me quite well. I didn't make the break unfortunately on stage 2, so don't really have too much to lose today, so definitely we'll give it a good nudge. And yeah, it's definitely quite hard to get to the climb, which is a bit of a change from last year, and quite a short climb but quite steep, so bluff-like, and yeah, really excited for it.
Of course, we've got some very good climbers here today, and then of course a lot of very good riders that over the last few days, so we've got to see a bit of form coming into the legs for a few.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to see guys like Mark, who's just been all over this race. That first day, being by himself, closed everything. So, and then guys like George and Novi are obviously world class. So it's really cool just to have those guys in the race.
Those hills start fairly early on. I think it's about 20k into it, the first climb of the day, and of course you're climbing over the finish 3 times.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to be able to have a good look at the finish each time we go over, and obviously there's points up for grabs each time, so try to get Case up for those, and yeah, just see what happens after that really.
Okay, all the best.
Thank you.
So joining us is George Bennett here of the New Zealand national team. Well, George, this is the stage that they've been talking about for a number of months.
Well, yeah, I guess it's the Queen stage here for climbing today, so yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty tough day actually.
And I guess, of course, with the sort of results you've had overseas, the riders know exactly the sort of rider that you are. This is the sort of thing that puts a bit of pressure on your shoulders coming into it?
Oh, I mean, pressure's probably a bit of a stretch. I mean, it's a kind of, you know, it's been a tough week already for me. It's been perfect so far to get the work in, that, you know, the high intensity work that we haven't done yet. And, you know, suffered like hell on the first day. Second day also, yesterday was a bit better, and then hopefully I can just sort of keep building and see if I've got some legs, found a bit of form yet. But you know, a hard race like this is you know, you've still got to be pretty fit. You know, it doesn't matter if you're a good climber. You know, if you don't have the top end in you, I think, you know, it's a pretty good field here, and it's always hard to do well. So I'll give it a crack, and you know, just try and make it as hard as I can for myself. You know, that's why we're here. You know, step forward, and still 6-7 weeks away before we need to be really in good shape. So it's still pretty early days, but yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to this kind of day just because it's, you know, a bit more action for me and a bit more sort of my terrain, let's say.
And how special is it being able to wear the national champions jersey in a race like this?
Yeah, it's nice, you know. Didn't sort of realise that if you're in the national team you have a different jersey than still wear the national champs jersey, so she's a bit big for me, had to pin her up a little bit, but you know, yeah, it's nice, it's really cool. So good opportunity, and cool to race in it on home roads. You know, didn't really think I'd get that opportunity, so yeah.
I wish you all the best for today.
Thank you very much.
So Bailey O'Donnell with us here from the Oxford Edge team, and the Oxford Edge team have been pretty well performed over the last few days.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool. There's a first time doing a UCI race for the team. It's kind of started up a few years ago and been moving our way up, and now we're at a UCI race, which is pretty cool, and we'll see competing with everyone, and it's good fun.
Some tough climbs here on the roads today, Bailey.
Yeah, today looks pretty tough. Nothing crazy long, but some really sharp, nasty ones that will test the legs, I'm sure.
What are you expecting of those GC riders? Of course, there's about a dozen of you, about a minute apart.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a small group left at the end, and just who can hang on and who's got the legs and who's saved the most energy. And then that last climb is going to be a nasty one to the finish. I see some time gaps open up, I'm sure.
Ideal conditions, but I guess you won't get too much opportunity to look at the views and enjoy the sunshine.
Yeah, no, it's finally a really hot day out here. We haven't had one yet, but I suppose being from South Island, we're not quite used to this, but we'll give it a go.
All the best for today.
Sweet, thank you.
The penultimate stage of this year's tour sees riders contest a number of climbs throughout the 137 kilometres, including 3 times up the newly introduced Tufaru Hill. As the riders progress through the undulating Carterton district, we will no doubt see the climbers come to the fore as they battle for overall general classification honours in the Queen stage of this year's tour. So the riders, as they've traditionally done over the last few days, heading away from the Copthorne here in Masterton. It's been a great base throughout the week for the riders here, for both the officials and the riders to mix each evening as they head out here. And a slightly later start this morning out of Masterton, and that's due to the fact that they've had the Grand Fondo, and that where they've had around 100 riders, local club riders and riders from around the country, front up and do either 50 or 100 kilometres of the stage that these riders are about to take on board. So no doubt we might see 1 or 2 of them on the sides of the roads here. Ideal conditions in that here for both racing and for the Grand Fondo. As we see Nick Kirkazoo in the green jersey, the Sprint Ace jersey, no doubt will be keen to have a wee nudge off the front when they have 1 sprint available here today to try and pick up some extra points before heading into tomorrow afternoon's criterium in Wellington. And straight away, as the flag is dropped, we see one of the ITM riders heading off, and a few others starting to have a little bit of a look. I think that could be Miles Gibson. Yeah, Miles Gibson, based in Queenstown, from Ireland. He's been in Queenstown for about 5 years now, an engineer from around that way, and got inspired by the Tour of Southland a few years ago. Saw them go past and thought, I wouldn't mind giving this bike racing a bit of a go. So this is now his second attempt at the New Zealand Cycle Classic, and we'll make out the names of the riders coming through here in this half dozen or so that have decided to go pretty early. The green jersey certainly has made himself available, Kirkazoo. Also in there, it looks like the familiar figure going right through to the front now would be Amaru, the man from France. Of course, the former, as we said, representative for kickboxing we've mentioned the last couple of nights. He's actually here for about another week. He's going to contest in the Criterium Championships, with just a few blocks down the road from him in Christchurch. Next Saturday, and then the following day he's on a plane away to shift to Queensland, and that in the sunny Gold Coast. So these 6 getting together, and you can see the dark colours and the flying mullet. Shane Archbold, of course, he is the man as part of George Bennett's team, who is obviously one of the serious contenders today. The hilly terrain will certainly suit the likes of George Bennett, and obviously the tour leader himself, Mark Stewart, who's looking very strong. So Archbold been sent forward by his team. He'll be looking just to keep an eye on these guys, and none of them are of any serious threat whatsoever when it comes to the general classification. But no doubt Shane has been put up the road there in anticipation of a move by Bennett and the team later in the stage, and he'll be able to drift on back and assist at that point in time. So he gets to cruise on through there. He may or may not take part in the sprints that will come up at around 56 kilometres, because he's got his teammate Lawrence Pithy, who we've mentioned over the last few days, is contesting a number of the jerseys, and currently, and that he's tied on the same amount of points as Kirkazoo, but it's Kirkazoo who's managed to escape the clutches of Pithy here and decide to go off the front. It won't suit the big man, and that's the sprinter Kirkazoo from Southland, this rolling terrain, but he's got one mission in mind here today for the St. George team. They've sent him up the road to try and pick up those points, to try and give himself a little bit more of a buffer potentially going into the criterium tomorrow afternoon, where we're going to see 3 sprints up for grabs as well as the stage victory. So that jersey, no doubt, will be still being contested tomorrow. whereas a number of the other jerseys should be pretty much signed and sealed today. Certainly the King of the Mountains will be. This will be the last day of the hills, but what a day of hills it is, as these riders will do a couple of circuits around the dairy industry, around out here through Carterton, and that is the area they've gone through, Gladstone. They've got a number of hills and an introduction this year of some new hills in the tour as well. And that's one of those being, of course, the one that will go over 3 times throughout the tour. And you can see them starting to head up there right as we speak here. And that is Te Wharu. And that hill, that is where these riders are going to head over it twice up this particular direction. And then on the last time rounds, and that they'll cut across over the Limeworks Hill, which is another tough climb, and come up from the other side. So they'll be descending it, flying down at 90 to 100 k an hour during the stage for the first 2/3 of the stage, but then turning and coming back up it from the other side. A little bit like the old Alpe d'Huez, the Tour de France, and that coming from different angles. And certainly George Sanderville and his team have introduced here quite a challenging stage here in this Queen stage of this year's tour, as we see George Jackson to the forefront by the looks of it there for the Mitre Q team, sitting on the front and trying to control things as they make their way through, looking for a few of the King of the Mountains points. As we said 3 times today, there are points up for grabs. And if you're new to the sport, these classification jerseys offer points for the first 3 or 4 riders each time as they go over some of the key climbs in a stage, as we see George Bennett. And great to see in the New Zealand colours and his national top. Of course, he's out to defend that in a few weeks' time, so this is fantastic preparation for him very early in the season, as it is for all of the riders here, because he'll be targeting more the likes of July when it comes to support of his teammates, and of course the defending Tour de France champion in July. But in the meantime, his focus is on this particular stage to see what sort of damage they can do. How can they dethrone the man in the yellow jersey? Of course, that is Mark Stewart, and that's sitting about 12 back there in the bright yellow colours. Oh, as a few riders hit the deck, and Stewart's very close by there, but it seems to have avoided it. It certainly looks like a few of his own teammates, though, that are in there, the Bolton Equities team, and I think possibly a few of the Mitre Q boys also in the mix as well. So it didn't look too serious going into the grass on the side, but hopefully they'll be able to get themselves back up and into action as we switch back to the front of the race. And we have gone from a group of 6 riders who are over 2.5 minutes and getting actually approaching 3 minutes in distance from the chasing peloton, now down to just the 3. And Kian Watts is one of the men that are in here, a junior world's rep from the past, and that very well seasoned bike rider. He's sitting in second wheel. He's in the New Zealand selection team, along with, of course, the New Zealand national team representative Shane Archibald, riding for Bora this year, back on the world scene once again for that team. And of course, Kirkazoo, as we know, is already in there for one particular reason. It's not the hills. It's all about into Johnson Street there to take out some more points for himself in the sprint ace category, as we switch back to what looks like to be the chasing bunch now of the 3 that were originally with them, as well as a few others that have joined them now. Now they're about 1:10 currently behind them on one of these long descents, and as we said before, this particular descent that you're seeing now will be where the riders will be coming from the other way on the final lap into this particular stage. So it's going to be a real grunter of a climb for these riders. As you saw, one of them place the bottle up into the air. That's the indicate to the officials that they could do with a few fluids, and so they'll either send up a neutral wagon with that or one of their own team wagons. Every rider in that, of course, in a team of the 14 teams, having team supports in the convoy throughout the tour. And of course, the convoy, for the order of it, if you're new to the sport here, they're placed in order according to their general classification position. So obviously the man in yellow was Stewart, will have his team car at the very forefront, so the very front of the order. So the likes of Keegan Hornblow's team, who's second up in the GC, will have Couplands right up there in that position, and so forth. Shane's heading back to his team car to get the drink. No doubt also checking in at the same time as they go over for the hill climb here as to what's happening back in the chasing peloton. More importantly, what's happening with his leader, George Bennett, as the 3 of them tuck into position and head down back towards Masterton. And that where, as we said earlier, there is the sprint ace up for grabs here. As I said, there's only really one man that's keen to try and pick up those particular points. And it looks like the second breakaway now being sucked back into the fold here of the main peloton. And it looks like the vast majority is still together. As we've said time and time again, you can pretty much tell by the way they're spread across the road that not a lot of massive pressure going on just at this point in time. And that when they start singling out into file there, then you know very well that there are things starting to happen into it. But that group of half a dozen, looks like they've had their day in the sun. And it now just leaves those 3 riders out in front who are still hovering around that 2.5 minute margin here. So the peloton, very good with their maths. They'll be getting the time checks and that from the side of the road at that climb, no doubt from many of their support crew, as well as the team directors when they come up and pass them the drink bottles, etc. There's a big effort now, goes on to the front of the climb, and then we see the man in yellow following the polka dot jersey. That's Pithy, who's putting a lot of pressure onto the field here. And all of a sudden, look at the body language of some of these riders here as they start to be challenged with some of these climbs. They're out there in 26 degrees around the outskirts of Masterton today, so things are just warming up literally for these riders as well on this penultimate day of the 2022 New Zealand Cycle Classic. But our 3 riders continue just to roll smoothly together. As we said, all there for various reasons. Car, no doubt, trying to get himself potentially a stage victory. Not a bad move going so early, and that's hoping that the decision making back in the main fold is a bit hesitant there and allowing these guys to go out. But at this point in time, it's not looking to be that particular way as they keep hovering around that couple of minute margin as we head back into the township where we began. Indication there, 1k to go to the sprint as Kirkazoo. He starts to give it a wee bit of a nudge just to see, are they going to try and take the points off me? No, thank you very much, gentlemen. I'll take the maximum points and add that to my tally that I established yesterday to put myself into the green jersey. Looks like a sole rider just sneaking off the front there of the main peloton, who have got the Tour Leaders team controlling things at this point in time. And I think that looks like that was the likes of Richard Lawson, number 75, the man behind the Oxford Edge cycling team based out of Canterbury. But meanwhile, it is the yellow jerseys team on the front, as you would expect as part of the protocol. And that's that these riders would expect them to do a fair chunk of the work. It's their job to try and defend the all-important yellow jersey. A yellow jersey which the Scotsman has never experienced before in his cycling career. So he's excited by the fact of being in it, and he's certainly taken it with both hands and is making the most of every opportunity out there in the racing. They suck in yet another one of the riders having a bit of a nudge on these climbs here. Important here for the Tour leader to stay calm. He can see what's going on here. A lot of the teams in the black colours, the New Zealand national team here, Bennett sitting in second wheel. He's got the likes of Xander White sitting onto the front, really starting to wind things on up for him and make life tough for the man in the yellow jersey. And he's positioned himself very well indeed. But you can see Stewart not at all looking too panicked by the situation here as Bennett gets out of the seat. Winds it up slightly more here. Ollie Jones getting himself in the mix. We mentioned him today as a potential stage winner here. Of course, he's already in the top half dozen in the overall general classification, and Ollie's a very good climber indeed. Now riding for the St. George Continental Cycling Team as they catch up to Shane Archibald, who, as we said earlier, had a particular role to play. He's given it away with Kian Watts and has come straight back as they made their way back over the hill once again, and now on the huge big descent, the one we said they'll be turning around coming back up later. Kian Watts having a wee bit of a look going, is this worth it? Can I do this out here all day long by myself? And I think the answer is no thank you. I'll head back into the peloton as we see another couple of riders decide to give it a wee bit of a nudge off here as they make their way around for the second loop of this circuit. 137 kilometres for these riders here today. And it looks like, again, one of the St. George riders making himself available towards the front. That's James Harvey that's decided to go. And he's got one other rider heading away with him at this point in time to try and establish some sort of a decent sort of a gap on there. Again, hoping that the main field won't catch him. And it's Theo Gilbertson, who's riding for the Mitre Q New Zealand Cycling Project team. Now, of course, they've got the likes of Josh Burnett in their team. So again, this could be an opportunity to send one of their teammates up the road, allowing Burnett then the privilege of sitting back in the main peloton and said, well, I don't need to be rolling through. One of my teammates is up the road. So plenty of chess on wheels happening out there on the roads. It's certainly not all about being the strongest and the fastest. There is a lot of brain power required in here. A lot of mathematics goes on as well, obviously, to ensure that we can close down those gaps at the absolute precise sort of times that are required. You see another great aerial shot here with the drone coming in of the main peloton. The guys have been doing some fantastic filming for you for the week here to bring you this coverage of the tour for this 2022 edition. And I know we had some great feedback there, and it's fantastic to see the likes of the world-class riders. George Bennett here having a wee look over and saying, come on guys, let's roll on through. If you want to take this race, then you're going to have to get on the front here and make the race happen. And he's got his teammates up there. You can see that sort of yellowy, purpley colour there of the Bolton Equities. Here we go. Here they are, the Bolton Equities team here of the yellow jersey. And they are on the front there protecting Mark Stewart. Meanwhile, George Bennett looking around to see where his teammates are. They've done a lot of work on the hills as we head back down into the flats. And it is, again, Harvey and Gilbertson. Well, settling down into their paces here. Both these riders, and that have a lot of experience racing around New Zealand, a bit overseas and that as well. And of course Harvey, and that's already, they're on a high with their teammate Kirkazoo taking the stage yesterday. They decided today, well, we've picked up some extra points in the sprint race, why don't we take a stage victory as well? As Ollie Jones hits off the front. You can see who's having to do all the chasing here. It is the man in yellow. As you would expect, as Bennett has another hit at him here. Looks over the shoulder, and Stewart, he's just sitting there patiently. He's not getting panicked. He's not putting himself into the red zone here. They're not too concerned by those two men off the front. They know they're no threat to the general classification. They are all about here trying to take the overall victory. And when the big players come to play, and it looks like about 8 of them, they open up the gaps every time. As we see Bennett out of the seat trying to stir things along here. And it looks like Gilbertson is going to be sucked back into the fold. So that'll leave Harvey himself now out in front as the individual potentially to take out this Queen stage. It would be a huge victory for himself and the team here. But as the man in yellow who's placed his own teammates there towards the front to try and shut it in, as George Jackson decides, well, I'm not hanging around with the yellow. I'll try and get myself across here. Now, there's a bit of a gap of about 3/4 of a second, about 45 seconds that he's trying to get across as James Harvey slowly but surely is being reeled in, and they're getting down now under 10 kilometres to go here for these riders to try and take this stage, and you can see it now. They're in the distance. James Harvey looks over the shoulder a few times and he can see them coming. He's trying to give it absolute death there, but the legs have said, we've had enough, thanks very much. She's all over. As Oliver Gray of Cabjack's Castelli Custom, a team we haven't seen much of at all in the tour. He has a nudge now with a couple of K to go, and it's not a bad one. The Yellow and Co have sat back and they've allowed this man to go. But as we say that, he himself gets sucked back into it as they hit the wall, as the locals say here for the hill. This is the big climb up from the other side. This is the one they've been descending all day long. Can he take it out here today? The man in the yellow. Can he do it as well? George Bennett, can he take out this particular stage? Ollie Jones is sitting there in the mix. There is some serious hitters here trying to get themselves further up in the general classification. Hornblow starting to struggle a little bit there. As we also see the likes of the young Southlander as well, Josh Burnett, all starting to literally hit the wall here. They're starting to go up and down like a duck in muddy water, some would say, as the man in yellow starts to wind things on up. And I don't think these guys have got it in the legs. He is looking so comfortable with it. George Bennett gets out of the seat, but he's going backwards slightly there as Ollie Jones jumps forward. The man that's right into his Swift racing, he's finished 4th in the world for that there. Can he come home with an enormous big burst at the end? But I think there's not going to be enough real estate available to him as Mark Stewart, the former Commonwealth Games champion. He has won multiple medals in the World Cup on the track. He is opening up a bigger gap all the time. Our man in yellow has dominated here with 200 metres to go. Can he not only take the Queen Stage but the overall Tour victory? The answer to that looks like it's going to be a big yes as he comes across the line. Arms are raised for the crowd gathered here today. Mark Stewart of Scotland, he takes it on out for the Bolton Equities Black Spoke Pro Cycling. Ollie Jones next across the line, and George Bennett will secure third place. We're joined here by James Harvey, part of the St George team. Well, James, you come close to it, so you're away for a fairway at that stage.
Yeah, it was a pretty hard day, really hot, which I was kind of hoping for. Yeah, Theo and I got away after the second time up the KOM, and we sort of stayed away until that last climb before the final climb. And yeah, I just got a bit of a gap, and I was trying to wait for him because it would have been better together to try and get to the end, but I just had to make the decision and keep going. Held on for as long as I could and got caught about 3k out. I think the legs just seized up just enough to really make the last hill pretty hard.
And were you aware of the sort of things that were going on back there with the yellow jersey and George Bennett?
I had a fair idea because it had been like that pretty much the whole race. I think the Cycling New Zealand team were just attacking the Black Spoke team, just 1-2 every bloody move pretty much. And so I assumed that was going on, and Theo and I were trying to use that to our favour because they'd go, sit up, and we're just trying to hopefully we get out for as much lead as we could. I think we got out to maybe 2 minutes at the maximum, but just wasn't quite enough.
Oh, well, thanks for lighting up the race for the day.
Cheers.
Joining us here is Lawrence Pithy, part of the New Zealand team, of course, who were out the front all day long, putting a lot of pressure on those riders, Lawrence.
Yeah, we really tried to put a lot of pressure on Mark today. The old Flying Scotsman, we couldn't put him away, unfortunately. He was just too good today.
Yeah, he seemed to be a man possessed, didn't he? He was determined to stay in that yellow.
Yeah. We got to give all props to him. We threw everything at it today and we couldn't get there, so yeah, all props to him.
And for you personally in that there, of course, you move into the under-23 jersey.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy to move into that U23 jersey. Saw all those under-23 boys were looking like they were suffering a little bit over the Limeworks climb. I was the only one there, so I thought I'd have a good nudge up the final climb and try and hold them off.
Well, congratulations, Mark. After the riders threw everything at you today, you came and dominated.
Yeah, like I kind of alluded to earlier, I came to this race last year, I didn't know what to expect, maybe my condition wasn't great, but I loved it. I enjoyed the parcours, I enjoyed just how it was organised, so I thought I'd really love to come back to this race in some good condition and give it a crack. So it's not often that you plan to do something and it actually works out. It feels kind of nice.
But that New Zealand team, of course, they were trying to crack you every time we hit a hill.
Yeah, I think I love going hard, and that's how I train, that's how I like to race. So the harder they went, the better I felt, to be honest. So I didn't want to tell them that when they were doing it. But I was thinking, this is great, and I had my boys around me. They just kept coming back and back and back, and yeah, I probably couldn't have done it without them, to be honest. So big kudos to the whole of Black Spoke.
And it must be a great confidence booster being able to take out the Queen Stage in such fashion.
Yeah, I think I've had a kind of for the last 2 years I've been kind of working independently. I've definitely had people that have supported me, like my old team Ribble from back home. But at times I felt like a bit of an island, so for like Murray Bolton and Black Spoke to come in and have some faith in me, it feels really nice. So to be able to kind of put that pressure on my shoulders, that positive pressure, and deliver, it feels pretty amazing, to be honest.
And there's plenty of people around the world. I know Scottish Cycling this morning making a comment as well in support. You want to do a shout out to anyone back home?
Absolutely. Again, Scottish Cycling have been amazing. Obviously my parents, my family. There's too many people to mention, but over the last, 10 years, there's been some key people that have really helped me, whether it's little projects that I've wanted to do, and yeah, they all know who they are, and it keeps me motivated to train. And then when I get to races, I think you're not just doing this for yourself. There's a whole plethora of people that you can share your journey and your success with, and that's pretty motivating.
Well, congratulations. We look forward to seeing you in action tomorrow.
Yeah, I look forward to racing again.